Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the live session of Energy Resources, Economics and Environment course. This is a 12 weeks course, and the last week, the course lectures for last week were out on 11th April, and the exam date is scheduled on May. We have 1,673 learners enrolled this time, and 452 learners registered for the exam. Uh, we have Professor Rangan Banerjee as course instructor, and there are three TAs. Professor Banerjee is currently the director IIT Delhi. From February 2022, he is on Leon from IIT Bombay, where he served as the Forbes Marshall Chair Professor in the Department of Energy Science and Engineering. His areas of interest include energy management, modeling of energy systems, energy planning and policy, hydrogen energy, and fuel cells. We also have three TAs with us, myself, Pratik, and there are two other TAs, Sandeep and Tarun. We'll briefly introduce and then we'll start with the presentation that Professor Banerjee has planned to schedule. Then we will go to the questions and answers. So I request learners to write comments if you have any doubts or questions, and then we will address them towards the end of the session. So I'll start with my introduction, and then I request Sandeep and Tarun to introduce themselves briefly. So I'm Pratik Joshi. I'm PhD student at Ashang Desai Center for Policy Studies. My work is in accelerating the deployment of rooftop solar PV systems in India. And I have been a TA for multiple times for this course. I hand over to the Sandeep for the brief introduction. Sandeep.
Thanks, Pratik. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Sandeep Yadav. I am a research scholar at Department of Energy Science Engineering at IIT Bombay. I recently completed my PhD in energy engineering. I work on majorly the energy efficiency and process and integration for the industrial processes. I'm doing techno-economic analysis of various industrial processes with a focus on the decarbonization and energy efficiency. I just take forward for Tarun to continue.
Hi, good afternoon, all of you. Myself, Tarun Goyal. I am a research scholar at IIT Delhi in the Department of Energy Science and Engineering. Currently, I am in third year, and my research area is related to the forecasting of solar energy potential using by the help of machine learning models and also the designing of the latent heat storage system for means storing the surplus energy from the solar PV plant. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarun and Sandeep. Now we'll start with the presentation. I request Professor Banerjee to
Yeah,
start the presentation.
we'll put it on. Good afternoon. And you know, the recordings that you have seen are at least 6 years old. So I thought it would be good to just update some of the numbers. We will also take this opportunity to discuss a little bit about the exam that we had. And in case you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer this. Uh, you have basically been interacting with Pratik, Sandeep, and Tarun, and they have been answering your questions as we have gone through the course. So I just want to take you through some of the things that we've already discussed, but the numbers that you may have seen were a little old. And as we discussed in this course on resources, economics, and environment, we are in the midst of the energy transition. We have also declared our goal of moving towards net zero. And we'd like to just summarize a few things today in this session. So, as we had shown earlier, you have seen this world and India, and you can see that in the case of you would have seen that the numbers currently we have now gone to about almost 39 exajoules of primary energy, and the per capita electricity use going to about 1,000 kilowatt hours. We our total emissions annually are of the order of 2,300 million tons, which is about 7% of the world's average. So roughly the same order of magnitude in terms of percentages, but you can see the growth. And we're talking of 1.6 tons per capita for our for India as compared to the world average of 4.4 tons. Now, one of the things that we did discuss in the course, but not in too much detail, was about the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you look at all the Sustainable Development Goals which are there, which was started in 2012, and all the countries are looking at how we can look at the Sustainable Development Goals, you can see that the Sustainable Development Goal 7, which is affordable and clean energy, very clearly is related to what we are discussing in the course. Also, energy and having cheap and sustainable energy is important for decent work and economic growth, and the industry innovation and infrastructure, and also related to climate action very directly, but it's also indirectly related to all other sustainable development goals. So the interesting thing is the recent report on the SDGs shows that only about 15% are on track, and many have actually not gone the way it should. We can also see, if you look at the investments in the energy sector in the last 4 to 5 years, you'll see very clearly that there has been a significant, most of the investment, as we expected, has been in renewables and grids and storage and on electrification. So the renewables investment has actually outstripped the investment that has happened in fossil fuels, and also the significant investment in 2023, about 1.8 trillion US dollars. And the needs for going future for the transition are, of course, much, much higher than that. And so this is a challenge, but this is a sector where there is a lot of growth and there are significant amounts of investments. Having said that, we should also recognize that in the last year, in the case of coal in India, we actually crossed 1,000 million tons. So despite the growth in renewables, fossil also has been growing. And so it's not that these have declined. And as we go forward, that is the kind of challenge in the transition. We saw the Sankey diagram for earlier years, and you will see that similar kinds of trends persist, with the renewables growing at a sort of faster rate. And you can see that in terms of the actual installed capacity of electricity, you'll see that out of 460 gigawatts, it's interesting that solar is about 100 gigawatts, wind about 48 gigawatts. So by installed capacity, we are talking of a very significant amount of renewables. If you add solar, wind, and hydro, we are getting about more than 40% of the total. And of course, when you look at it by generation, the percentages are lower. You can look at these numbers and compare it with the numbers that we had in the class, which is about 4 or 5 years earlier. And you can look at the breakup of the capacities. I'm not going to focus on these numbers, but these are things which you can look at. The slides are going to be shared with you. And the share of renewables, excluding hydro, is about 13% by generation. If we add hydro, it's another 9%. So we are actually talking of more than 22%, which is actually renewable and green electricity. And we talked in the class about the Kaya identity, and you can look at these numbers in terms of the carbon intensity, energy intensity, how that has changed over the years and how that needs to change. We did discuss in the class our Paris commitments, and you know that after the Paris commitment in Glasgow, our Prime Minister Modi, in COP26, enhanced those commitments to talk about 500 gigawatt of non-fossil power, and also that 50% of our energy mix would be based on renewables. We also decided that we would achieve net zero carbon dioxide emissions by 2070. And you can see renewable installed capacity. You have seen this graph also in the class, and you can see the capacity and generation growing at significant. In the past, we made the transition, and we talked about this, from traditional to modern commercial fuels. We had large investments in centralized supply and distribution infrastructure, and we've had a large electricity connected grid, which is now connected to every village in the country, and large hydro and coal-based thermal power plants. The focus was on supply growth and public sector and government investments. This is what has happened in the past. In the last decade or so, we are now looking at changes in the supply mix. We are focusing on efficiency. We are trying to move away from oil in the transport sector, going to electric, hydrogen, looking at LPG for cooking energy, and we may think in terms of the challenges. LPG is still going to be a fossil, so we need to look at cooking, moving beyond that. Can we do electricity? Can we do modern biomass-based systems? We're looking at buildings to make them net zero or energy plus buildings. And we are looking at industry to make it zero carbon. So we look at efficiency, renewables, and look at next generation processes. This is something where all of you can actually play a big role, because the industry of tomorrow is going to be different in terms of the way in which it's going to do its supply. And the three things that we can do. The energy transition that we are talking about are moving away from fossil, with the significant reduction in prices of PV, wind, and renewables, and also reduction in prices of shale oil and natural gas. We've also had very significant drop in prices of LED and efficiency, and then the improvements and cost reductions and technology in Internet of Things. So you can see these are trends again that you can see overall over a period of time. You can see how the photovoltaic and wind and CSP costs have come down drastically. And this you can see in the Indian context. I showed you this also in the policy part of our lecture course. You can see that we've come down to where you have large grids for, less than 3 rupees, 2 rupees 30 paise per kilowatt hour. And of course, this makes it significantly improved. And when we think in terms of net zero, there are many different ways in which we can calculate net zero. So one is when we take net zero only in terms of carbon dioxide, and we do it annually. The other one is net zero considering all greenhouse gases and the economy, but we do it annually. The next one is when we do that, but we also consider, we get imports, we are giving exports. There is embodied energy and embodied climate, embodied carbon in all of the imports and exports. If we account for that, it's a little more tricky, but there are studies which do that, and we can consider the total GHG impact of India, and then we can look at this, including the impact of trade. And then there is the last way you take not just annual, but you look at cumulative emissions. As we've seen, CO2 and other greenhouse gases have a residence time in the atmosphere, and they will last. It's not just for 1 year. So the cumulative emissions. Typically, most of the cases, we are usually taking the second aspect, where we take net zero considering all GHGs and the economy. Sometimes we take the one with including imports and exports. But whichever way you do it, you can make this computation. I just wanted to show you, and I think I will discuss this briefly. In this graph, if you see, there is we have the past trajectory. The y-axis is the CO2 emissions, and the x-axis is the time. You can see the actual trajectory of CO2 emissions. If we project that going forward, you have the extreme curve, which goes on an exponential basis. If you look at the last few years and you look at the reduced growth rate, you have the second curve, which is also growing exponentially. If we then decide a peak year and then let it go to zero, then we find that this is how we can get that 2070 target. So this is one possible scenario, and this is one of the ways in which we actually discussed with Nitya. When you look at, we created a system by which we could modify the peak year and the target year for net zero, and we could create alternative scenarios. And based on those alternative scenarios, we gave the policymakers choices where you could choose which year, 2050, 2060, 2070. And the option that was chosen was 2070 because India needs more time to be able to go to net zero, with the idea that we will not affect the growth and the economy in that fashion. I just wanted to tell you some of the challenges which we've talked about also in the class. When we have higher renewables, what happens? So I just wanted to give you an example of Rajasthan. And in Rajasthan, we'll talk about a few different power plants of similar kinds of ratings. So in Rajasthan, we have one of the largest solar power, 2,250 megawatts, 14,000 acres. It's near Jodhpur. We also have a large wind farm in Rajasthan, 1,064 megawatts, 5,000 kilometers squared. And I would like to give you an example of the average generation of three of these plants in Rajasthan in the grid at a particular kind of on a particular day and a particular time. If you look at the installed capacity, Suratgarh thermal power plant, 2,820 megawatts. On during the day, the average generation 1970 megawatts. If we take the capacity factor, you can calculate it, it comes out to be 70%. And the peak generation from this 2,800 megawatts was 2,000 megawatts at 8 p.m. in the night. On solar, on the other hand, the installed capacity 4,658 megawatts, peak generation 4,456 megawatts at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The average generation is 1,240 megawatts. Interestingly, wind of the same capacity, but peak generation only 984 megawatts, and it's at midnight where you get 254. The average generation is only 254 megawatts. So the point to note is that this is one particular day. You can take a different day and you'll have different shares. And this is the biggest challenge when we talk about solar and wind, the timing of the supply and demand and the matching of that, and where a thermal power plant is dispatchable. And then this is the question. So this is the kind of load curve which we have. And you can see the load curve is such that we have a significant requirement at different points in the evening as well as in the peak time. And so we have, as we grow, and this is from Pratik's work, we've looked at centralized and decentralized, and most of our growth in PV has been large centralized plants. And this is something which one needs to think about because of the ease of financing, but this has some implications going forward. We've also made some projections. We've tried to see what is the potential, and we can actually see that we can have a very significant amount of, and then you can also project what will be the PV per unit, use this to make projections for the future. So the challenges that we talked about in terms of the renewables, when we have larger renewables, is we have a short-term variability because you suddenly have cloud cover. You have a mismatch during the day in terms of morning, evenings, and then seasonally, if you look at wind, wind is very much in the during the monsoon periods, and in other periods the wind output is less. We talked in the course about the California duck curve, and a similar kind of curve can be also shown for the Indian context. This is a projection of a potential duck curve, that is what will be required from the non-renewable portion, the coal and gas, and how they have to ramp up and ramp down. And these are some of the issues which will be there in when you talk about transitions. We will also see beyond the point when we have more and more PV in the grid, there will be a point where everything, any additional PV that we need, which is during the sunshine hours, will not be used during that period and has to be stored and used in another period, which means that we need additional battery capacity. And those are the kind of things. We've already talked in the about the different types of policies that we had. I just like to tell you that we've also recently launched the hydrogen mission. The government has launched, which started with the budget speech in 2021, and then the green hydrogen was launched again in 2021. The focus was on energy security, India to be a green hydrogen hub. In 2023, the National Green Hydrogen Mission was approved by the cabinet, and the set of incentives for green hydrogen and technology are announced for electrolyzer manufacturing and green hydrogen production. And currently the status is in 2024, about 5 million tons of hydrogen is produced. Most of it is gray hydrogen from steam methane reforming and natural gas. We have proposed that now there will be a green hydrogen consumption obligation like the renewable purchase obligation, where fertilizer production, petroleum refineries having to have a certain percentage blending of gray hydrogen with CNG has been tried in some pilots. Green hydrogen has been blended with the city gas network, and we have some solar hydrogen pilot refueling station. There's also a hydrogen corporate fund. The target is to have 5 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030, open access for renewable purchase for green hydrogen, banking of renewable energy, waiver of interstate transmission charges, and some RPO benefits. And so as we look at the future energy system, we have also discussed this. Because of the nature of changes in our energy supply system and the fact that there is going to be daily seasonal variability, there's going to be a need for flexibility, storage. And then also we are seeing climate change impact on renewables, there's impact on economy, and we need to also look at what happens to the existing fossil infrastructure. We need to assess the costs of transition, and then regional differences, impact on vulnerable populations, and equity impact. These are some of we talked about green hydrogen, typically refinery, ammonia, iron and steel, some possibilities in heavy duty trucking, and maybe in the power in the storage options. The other option that we've not discussed too much in the course, but is something which is possible, currently looks a little bit more costly than the renewables, is carbon capture and storage. And mostly we are currently it's a methylamine MEA kind of method, which is using chemical absorption. And there are other membranes, cryogenic adsorption, and a whole host of technically many things are possible. And what is viable is to look at CO2, which is captured and then used. So that means you use it in creating fuels, methanol, DME, and we can also look at it as in terms of carbonation and various other applications for CO2. Enhanced soil recovery is another option. So I think with this, I will stop here. And if there are any questions or comments, we can take that up. Yeah. I'm not sure if there is anyone online, but there is one person. Yeah. If you have any question or comment, otherwise we'll ask the TAs to go ahead and ask their question.
So Kashif has joined. Kashif, do you have any comments, queries, questions? You can.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Thank you for your time. Actually, as you have mentioned about INDC and our installed capacity and RE integration, as I'm working in power sector, I feel that in next few years in future, I'm in a fix that what will be the mix of power. We are in RE around 30-35%, and our NDC is around 50% capacity from non-fossil fuels, right? So what will be the mix of thermal with respect to RE, and how is going to be in days to come? That is, I'm in a fixed position. So Professor, please highlight about it.
So, if you just, Kashif, if you look at the trend, you can see that the share of RE has been increasing, right? And that is very clearly, we can see that if you add to the RE, if you add hydro, we are talking of 20-25%. It will keep increasing, but the question is that there are going to be issues and costs as it increases, because then we need to have much more capability of flexibility and storage. And so whether it's pumped hydro or large batteries, those are the kind of things which will go ahead, which will kick in when we talk about 35, 40, 50% of RE. So I don't want to, CEA has projections and you can look at those projections in terms of shares. But the fact is that in the next decade or so, fossil will still continue to be the major in the power sector. But the share of renewables will continue to increase. And you can see the rapid, so, there are multiple scenarios depending on what you can look at, whether it's 30%, 40%, where you're talking of 5 years down the line, you're talking of 10 years down the line, but there will be a point where the grid will become first, the electricity grid will become zero carbon. And then we'll look at the overall energy becoming zero carbon. And so I think that's sort of the way to go. But within that means a lot of changes in the way we operate our power system.
Correct, sir.
Which is happening. Actually, we are very fortunate to have what was earlier POSOCO and now GRIDCO. There is a lot of capability in our power system. We are probably the largest centralized power system, and which operates, actually, given all the kind of constraints, we really operate much more efficiently than many of the power systems anywhere in the world, with the kind of uncertainties and the kind of things that we have. So I think I'm very optimistic about it, but I think there is a role for analysis, there's a role for looking at, and the other issue which is there is that, DISCOMs are having problems because their revenues are at stake. And many of these, when you take for some of these large power plants, or let's say a PV plant, it's like you'll have to have a fixed offtake and a fixed price. You'll have to assure the generator. And then that means, even if you take to the generator, by the time you take to the consumer, the cost of supply, and you're not able to get, we still have, we have many cases where we would like to give low usage residential free electricity. And that is a social goal, it's a political goal, it is being put, but finally when you do that, actually someone has to pay for it. And if that subsidy is transferred to the DISCOM, that is fine. But if it is not, then what happens is DISCOM become unviable. And over a period of time, then they are not able to make investments. So it's a tricky problem. And it's so I think these are some of the things which will be, as you go forward, there are costs associated with the transition.
Correct,
I'm
sir.
not sure I have answered your question, but the thing is that it's not a very easy question to answer.
Yeah, it was a detailed discussion, sir. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. As you discussed about that DISCOM, yesterday I gone through an article which said that around 70,000 crore dues is there on DISCOMs. They are unable to recover that amount. 70,000 crore. That is huge amount.
Yes.
And if this integration becomes a sort of mandatory from CEA or from that government organizations, it will be, I think, a huge burden for DISCOMs. Second thing, sir, one more thing that I have just in last few 2-3 years I have noticed that ministry has given a open you can say expansion of thermal power station as well. Like BHEL has around 39 number of boilers under erection. They have received around 1.80 billion rupees orders of 800 megawatt units. Okay, that is thermal based. So we are expanding huge in respect of thermal as well. We are expanding, huge in respect of RE as well. So this mix is, gonna be in next 5, 10 years, sort of uh, unprecedented in terms of our NDCI field. Second thing is that uh, thermal is the base power, right? Thermal is the base power, base for our economy, our power supply. So if you are installing a thermal power station as of now, its life is around 25 to 30 years, right? So in 2025, if we are commissioning, starting any or expanding any brownfield project, so it will last for next 25, 30 years. So it is in 2025 that will last for around 2050. Okay. So how we will that cater that our I mean to say that CO2 capture and all.
No, it's a good question. The point is, Kashif, if you look at the way in which thermal capacity additions have happened, if you plot that over time, you will see very clearly that we are phasing out. We are not doing the same amount of capacity additions. It is true that there are some additions, but the numbers are not projected to increase very significantly. Even the existing ones that we have, they have residual life, so we have to see what is going to happen for that. Now, if we could make CCS cost effective, then that would, of course, change things drastically. The issue which is there is that if we don't manage the grid and the storage and we ramp up renewables at a particular rate, then we may come up with shortages which have happened occasionally, right? And so the question is that what is going to make the baseload plan? And are we going to go beyond baseload and do it in some other way, right? Those are the type of questions which arise, and what is the cost associated with it. You also made another interesting point, which is about that 70 crores. Now the question is that do we have, this has been discussed several times, but it continues to persist. At some point, we have to say and take a decision and say, okay, we need to pay for this. And we need to pay, meaning if the government decides to write these off, right? Which means that we will need to then provide, it will have to be provided for, it will affect other economic sectors. In a phased way, one can think in terms of that. But the point is that, if we take certain decisions that the electricity which will be provided will be subsidized, fair enough, we can take that decision. It may be done for equity purpose, it may be done to provide access, but then there is a cost associated with it. We can't just take that decision and transfer that problem to the future generations by keeping that. That is what has happened, has been happening, because typically, and then finally what happens is DISCOMs become unviable. Then the whole thing, and also if you don't monitor things properly, and if you have, sometimes you have low usage residential, you don't even know how many connections. There are many other commercial and others which is called, basically, which is like commercial losses or which theft. So unless you have a proper auditing and things have changed a lot now with this, because now you do have SCADA, you have distribution level audits, but still there is a lot more problem. So it's not just a technical problem. It's actually a management and economic and social problem. And I think this is something that we try to highlight in the course, that many of the things related to energy, when we talk about, it's also related to the environment and to society.
Correct, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. One more short question that I have in my mind. Actually, I didn't get opportunity to interact with such a dignitary like you. So thank you very much for your time. First of all, there is a one order from ministry about flexible operation. Okay, so like we have around 2,300 megawatt plant, and one unit is 500 megawatt unit. So sometime it is asked to operate at flexible load that is 40% of its total capacity. So if unit is of 500 megawatts, so you have to operate at 200 megawatt. It was done on trial basis few months back at our station, and we could sustain for around 4 to 5 minutes only. After that, we have to use that basic support. We could not maintain that load based load. So thing is that flexible operation is not a simple cup of tea like it is an easy job. But ministry has issued a circular that when there is a solar and wind energy available over there, power available over there, the base thermal load should be decreased to flexible operation. So at one part is operational difficulty. Second part is it leads to maintenance difficulty as well. Like there is temperature and thermal variation in short duration. Like in one day you are going for 500 megawatt load, and at one time, and after few hours you are going for 200 load. So there is thermal creep. There are stresses there. BTL, bulk tube leakages would be there. So that will affect availability of the plant as well. So I feel there must be some consideration about flexibility of flexible operation of thermal power stations as well.
So Kashif, actually there's a lot of literature on this, and there's an IEA report. This was during the COVID. I don't remember the exact years, but it's during the COVID time. There are and many of these Siemens and many of the power plant manufacturers. See, actually, the way in which thermal power plants were designed earlier were with the idea that they would be baseload plants.
Yes.
And they would have a minimum operation and a ramp rate. However, there are possibilities of changes in the technology, right? And you can retrofit a whole host of things to increase the flexibility. Why should we do it? Well, see, the point is, if you are not making that flexibility, then you will not be dispatched, and your overall capacity factor will be so low that it can be unviable. So actually, incorporating flexibility in the power plant, technically it's feasible. There are 4 or 5 different case studies in Europe, other places where they have shown actual power plants and then do that. So that is all possible. So there are many. See, if the rules of the game changes, the technology can be adjusted to do that. But then again, there are investments. So it will depend on the problem. Which often happens is this decision of when are you going to phase out the plant. Right, we've got some ultra supercritical and recent, things which have been just installed 4 or 5 years earlier, right? And they have another 30 years to go. So we do expect. So under what scenarios do we operate that? These are things which often there are uncertainties which are beyond the NTPC or the company which is operating it. And I think we need to. So these are things where there is scope for analysis and some of the things where we can suggest. So I think it's always a very interesting area for people who are in this domain, because you can actually suggest things which are. Yeah.
Correct, sir. Correct, sir. Okay, I think so one last question. One last question.
Yeah, we need to talk a little bit about the exam. But anyway, last question quickly.
Last question, sir. That is about my latest development in FGD area. Point is that flue gas desulfurization project has been made mandatory from ministry. In around 2018-19 there was a circular, and it was decided to complete by 2027. Then another study from IIT and NITI perhaps, they have shown that FGD is not required for Indian coal and Indian plants. Thing is that millions of rupees has been invested in around the country in various stations. Like in our station, we have 2 FGD commissioned in our unit 7 and 8, and 1 to 6 it is all under construction. So how these sort of decisions are taken when there are uncertainties in terms of studies like IIT and IIT NITI Aayog says that it is not required for Indian scenario. and then ministry says that no, it has to be implemented in phase-wise manner. And there was deadline 2027 or 2025, as I remember. 2027 was a deadline in the region C. So why
So-
FGD has met that
So
consequence?
I think this is a very interesting question. I know about this, both the views, and I know the colleagues in IIT Delhi who have given this report. Actually, I will talk to Pratik. We'll put links to both the different kinds of both the rule as well as the study reports and the Niti Aayog report. Indian coal has actually relatively low sulfur.
Correct.
And the question of SOx control, and specifically for power plants which are not in areas which have high population concentration, right?
Yeah, BNC.
If you look at, so it's not, unfortunately, we made a rule which is applicable to all power plants, and then, but many of the power plants did not, because it adds the cost. So I'm not very sure that it was a right rule. Now, the generic question which you ask is that, see, what happens is there are many different things. There is a technical view, there's an overall system view based on certain assumptions. So for the same problem, you may get two different opinions. Now, one particular thing you convince the ministry or you convince someone, and then you do that, and then it gets, and there are also sometimes there will be processes, lobbies, all of this. This is all part of the policy making process, right? If you look at the decisions which the US took last 4 years, and you see the current president in the first day of he has talked about a whole host of changes in the energy policy. You may look at that. So this is, as an analyst, we need to independently assess and see this and then try to influence. So it's an interesting area, and I think, Pratik, if we can put some links of this may be useful for some of the
Yes, sir.
FGD, because the FGD is a very interesting case.
Yes, we'll post in the announcements. the
Yeah.
links.
So let's talk a little bit about the exam.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kashif. So now I request Sandeep to ask. We have a couple of questions related to exam. So Sandeep.
Thanks, Pratik. So the first important topic about the exam is, could you please explain the format of questions in the final examination? Specifically, will it include the multiple choice questions similar to weekly assignments, or primarily consist of numerical and descriptive type long questions?
So the format that we have, it's a total is about 100 marks, and we will have essentially 30 MCQs, and these MCQs will be each of 2 marks each, so that means 60 marks. And then we have 8 questions which will involve some calculations and numericals. And these also will be where you calculate and you either fill in the blanks. And so this is 5 marks each. So 8 into 5 means 40 marks, and 60 marks, that coming to 100. Now, most of the things that we are talking about, if you look at what we have discussed in the lecture, the basic things related to that, and you are able to interpret and do some number crunching, not difficult, but basically it's not going to be exactly the number which we have done in the class. So things have changed a little bit. You'll need to understand that. In the MCQs, many of them are straightforward. Some of them just require understanding of the concept. So some of you may want to look at the options a little carefully. But in the past, I have been very disappointed with the performance, because I would expect typically people should easily score 60-70%, but the performance hasn't been that good. But you should just look at, I think if you have some of the questions that we did in the course and the assignments and look through the slides, it should be more than sufficient. There is nothing which we do beyond that.
Question that we have
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a second question is similar to that one. Could you please clarify whether the questions paper will primarily consist of theoretical or numerical problems?
Yeah, so it's a mix. It's a mix. So I think, you know, as I said, it's about 60-40, and many of those are actually things where you really don't have, if you have understood and gone through the lectures and the slides, it should be all fine. The numericals, whichever we've done, we did one question paper, we had a set of things. If you look at for each subject, the type of numericals that we, you know, we look at the Kaya identity, we look at the equilibrium, supply-demand equilibrium. One can see it's a similar pattern. So we don't, I have not asked questions where I expect you to reformulate or do something from scratch. It's very much pattern based on whatever we have done. Because we just want to see that, you know, the basics that we have taught in the course, you've spent some time imbibing that. And I think it should be, in my opinion, it should be, if you put in that, you should get 60 to 80% of it. But I think, yes, so you need to look at that. Yes,
Could you please
muted.
clarify the weightage distribution of the weekly topics? Like, is there any specific weightage given to the recently concluded weeks, or it will all
No.
in the same?
It is distributed throughout. So it's sort of uniformly across everything. There's nothing which we are talking of for it.
Thank you, sir. That's all we have, because most of the other questions you have already answered in the either in the form of live sessions or in the other
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
So that's all. Is there
Okay.
anything, Pratik?
No, thank you, Sandeep. Tarun, you have anything to add?
Pratik, Tarun, and Sandeep, if you want to, you know, give some message to the people who are preparing for the exam, because I think apart from people who are here, that maybe people will see it. You can, it's just, yeah. We can
Sandeep?
upload the formula sheet which we generally put along with the question paper, so that people know what are the things which they will have with them. They don't have to remember those formulas.
Yes, we will do that. Yes.
And some of the questions that we today, which Shiv asked, based on that, we can put some additional material.
Yes.
Or links we can send.
Yes. Yes. So I'll send an announcement related to what we discussed and any reports or links related to that.
Okay.
Okay.
I think
anything else, Tarun, Sandeep, Kashif, or okay? Then I guess we can we are towards the end of the session, so.
Yeah. I think we can just conclude and wish all our, all the people who are going to give the exam all the best. And I hope everyone qualifies and some of you get excellent results. I think that's, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you
Okay,
for
sir.
your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.